Bridget knows what's happened. She saw the two detectives arrive around lunchtime. She'd been waiting, hoping for such a development. She watched them bring Karen out of the house in handcuffs. She could hardly contain her satisfaction. She has been keeping a restless eye on the house all day, waiting for Tom to come home so that she can comfort him. He'll be alone now in that house, his life all but destroyed. Bridget knows it's all over for Karen. She will be convicted. She's sure of it. And then Tom can begin again with her. They'll be happy together, happier than he ever was with Karen. And she will never tear his life apart the way Karen has. Someday, Tom will see that Karen being taken away in handcuffs was the best thing that ever happened to him. Tom returns home in a state of shock. His wife has been arrested for murder, and he's pretty sure she did it. He wanders aimlessly into the kitchen and opens the fridge. He stands there, staring inside, suddenly remembering that the other time he stood here, staring sightlessly into the refrigerator. The night Karen disappeared. The night this all began. This is going to destroy their marriage. It's going to destroy their lives. And now his wife is caught up in the workings of the legal system. This is going to bankrupt him. He reaches in for a beer. He screws the cap off almost violently, and then turns and hurls it across the room. The cap hits a cupboard and ricochets around the kitchen, ending up somewhere under the table. What the fuck is he going to do? He paces the house angrily. There's nothing he can do. He can't believe it's come to this. And he's sure it's going to get worse in the days, weeks, and months ahead. He doesn't bother making himself something to eat. He has no appetite for food. He finishes the first beer quickly and returns automatically to the fridge for another. He's never been tested like this before, and he doesn't like what he sees. He's weak, and he's a coward, and he knows it. He's been trying to be strong for Karen, but his wife is much stronger and braver than he is. She appears to be made of steel. He stares in the mirror over the fireplace. He hardly recognizes himself. His hair is wild from nervously running his hands through it. He looks haggard, almost mean. He expected everything to be sunshine and kisses when he married Karen. It's as if life made him a promise the day that he married her, and now life has broken that promise. He feels intensely sorry for himself. He steps out the sliding glass doors to the backyard and sits outside the patio in the summer night as darkness falls upon him. Funny, he thinks now, 3 beers in. It hasn't occurred to him until this moment to remember what a hard time he had getting her to say yes. Of course, it all makes sense now. She was already married. The first time he asked her to marry him, she laughed it off as if he couldn't possibly mean it. Although he was careful not to show it, he'd been taken aback and hurt. He wondered why she treated his proposal so flippantly. He was completely serious when he asked her. They were lying all bundled up on a scratchy wool blanket, looking at the stars. They'd gone to a little inn in the Catskills for the weekend to see the fall colors. He grabbed the blanket from the back of the car and found a private spot. They lay down together, and he propped himself up on one elbow and gazed down at her. He could still remember the way the moonlit light lit her face and the happiness in her eyes. He asked, "Will you marry me?" And she laughed, as if he were making a joke. He looks up at those same stars now twinkling in the dark. How changed everything is. He remembers how he hid his hurt and disappointment both at the time and in the weeks following. He waited a bit and then bought a big, expensive diamond ring. He wanted to show her that he was serious. He presented it to her on Valentine's Day over a glass of pricey champagne at her favorite restaurant. Perhaps this was a mistake, Valentine's Day, but it doesn't make any difference now. What she said, he recalls as he sits in the dark on the patio with his beer in his hand, was, "Why can't we have a love story instead of a marriage?" This is their love story, come crashing down around their ears. Does he wish now that she'd never said yes? That she'd never agreed finally under his steady pressure to get married? He doesn't know, and anyway it's too late to change anything. And yet, these 2 last years have been the happiest of his life, till all this happened. Tom sees something moving in the dark at the side of the house. He freezes. He hasn't turned the light on in the back, not wanting to attract bugs to the light, so it's completely dark except for the stars. He can see someone approaching, but he can't tell who it is. Can't be the police. They've already arrested his wife. Surely they're not going to arrest him, too. He thinks it might be Dan coming to check on him. Dan had called earlier, but Tom hadn't called him back, and he must be worried. All this runs like quicksilver through Tom's head as he gets to his feet. He puts the almost empty bottle of beer down on a side table and squints into the dark. It's not Dan coming toward him in the dark, he sees with dismay. It's Bridget. He doesn't want to talk to Bridget. He wants to go back inside the house and close the door. But he can't exactly do that. Bridget always makes him feel uncomfortable. He'd been so intimate with her, so unrestrained. There was something reckless and exciting about her, and he found it irresistible at first, and that touched something reckless in him. But she soon became too intense for him, too much. He felt that she might swallow him whole. He never knew what to expect from her. She was too emotional. When he broke it off with her, he'd had quite a few anxious weeks, afraid that she would tell her husband about them and he would throw her out, and that she'd come banging on his door. Or later that she would tell Karen, embellishing what happened with lies, and destroy their promising new relationship. But she seemed to calm down, and then, quite unexpectedly, she became such good friends with his wife. There's nothing he could do about that. "Hi, Bridget," he says, enunciating carefully. He's not drunk. After 3 fast beers and an empty stomach, he's what might be called happy, except that he's not happy at all. Tom realizes rather suddenly that he doesn't want to be alone. "Would you like a drink?" he asks her. She looks at him as if surprised. "I knocked at the front and nobody answered. I came over to talk to Karen," Bridget says. "Is she here?" "No, I'm afraid not," Tom says, and he can hear the bitterness in his own voice coming across loud and clear. "What's wrong?" Bridget asks. He sees her eyes taking in how wrecked he looks, sliding to the beer bottle on the side table. Tom knows that it would be foolish to unburden himself to Bridget, but there's no one else right now. He realizes how terribly lonely he feels without Karen. He's never felt so lonely in his life. He gestures towards the kitchen just inside. "Let me get you a drink. What will you have, a beer? Or I can mix you something if you want." She follows him into the house. He opens the cupboard, scanning the liquor bottles on the shelf to see what he has to offer her. She's standing behind him. When he turns to ask her what she wants, she's staring at him with such avidity that it startles him. He turns back to look inside the cupboard. Rum, vodka. Can you make me a martini?" she asks. He looks back at her stupidly. When did she get so fancy? He has no idea how to make a martini. He wasn't expecting her to ask for something so exotic. I don't know how. I do, she says smoothly, and comes up beside him and looks into the cupboard. She starts taking down the bottles. Vodka, vermouth. You must have a shaker around here somewhere, she says, opening another cupboard and looking up high. Her eyes seem to light immediately on a silver cocktail shaker, something he'd forgotten they even had. Another leftover wedding present. They never use it. He and Karen are unfussy. Beer and wine drinkers, usually. He remembers how the two of them had needed a shot of whiskey the other night. Do you have any ice? Bridget asks. Tom turns to the freezer and pulls out the ice. While he's at it, he gets himself another beer. This will be his last one tonight, he promises himself, twisting off the cap and watching Bridget make herself a martini in his kitchen as if she owns the place. Feels strange having her here instead of Karen. So where's Karen? She asks. She's finished with the shaker now. She's grabbed a proper martini glass from the cupboard, he'd forgotten about those too, and pours herself a drink. She holds the glass close to her lips and takes a sip, looking coyly over the rim at him. For a second, Tom's confused. She's asking about Karen, who's in jail, but her tone is all wrong. She sounds more like she's flirting with him the way she used to. Suddenly he regrets having asked her in for a drink. It's too dangerous. What's the matter? She says, looking more the way she should, and he thinks that maybe he imagined it. He shakes his head. Nothing, he says, then everything. Tell me, she says, Karen's been arrested. Arrested? He nods. He must keep his feelings to himself. It wouldn't do to start getting too personal with Bridget. He shouldn't be telling her anything at all, but the beer has loosened his tongue. And what difference does it make? It will all be in the newspapers tomorrow. Arrested for what? Bridget says. He wonders if he looks as ghastly as he feels. Murder. One hand flutters to her mouth while the other puts her drinks down on the counter beside her. Then Bridget turns to face away as if she's overcome with emotion. He stands awkwardly, watching her. Finally, she reaches up into the cupboard for another martini glass and pours what's left in the shaker into it. She holds it out to him. He eyes it warily, and he thinks, what the hell? Takes a glass from her, lifts it in a silent, cynical toast, and downs it in one go. Tom, the alcohol hits him hard and fast, making everything fuzzy, blurring lines. Maybe you should go, he says. He tries to backpedal. Shh. Maple. He tries to backpedal the seriousness of the situation. He just wants to get her out of here before he says or does something he shouldn't. Come here, baby. Come here. Beat her. Okay. The police are grasping at straws. They don't have any other suspects, and they're trying to hang it on her, but she's got a good lawyer. He's speaking slowly, carefully, because he realizes he's drunk. They're going to realize she didn't do it. She told me she didn't do it, and I believe her. Tom, she says again. He looks at her uneasily. He can see the outline of her breasts beneath her top. He knows those breasts. For a moment, he has a vivid memory of being in bed with her, what she was like. Very different from Karen. He forces the thought aside. There's something you should know. He doesn't like the warning tone he hears in her voice. He doesn't want to hear about any little confidences Karen might have shared with her friend across the street. And he doesn't want another woman, an attractive woman, with whom he shares an erotic history, offering him comfort when he's vulnerable like this. He can feel himself becoming aroused at having her so close. It must be the alcohol. His defenses are down. "I think you should go, please," Tom says, looking at the floor. He wants her to leave. "You need to hear this," she insists. It's impossible to think in here. It's like being in the middle of a constant brawl. Karen curls into a fetal position on the uncomfortable cot inside her holding cell in the basement of the police station, and she tries to keep it together as the night wears interminably on. She's surrounded by drunks and prostitutes. The stench is unbearable. She tries to breathe only through her mouth. So far, she has a cell to herself, but every time she hears footsteps and shouts as the cops bring in someone else, she's afraid that they will open her cell door and put them in here with her. She thinks of Tom, alone in their bed at home, and tries not to cry. If only she were there with him, they could comfort each other. There's no comfort to be had in here.